Hi everyone, short video to show you two topics that I'm experimenting with. One is using GenAI to generate acceptance criteria and test cases, and the other is using GenAI to document code. So using ChatGPT Copilot Chat, I generated this user stories form where I can enter some requirements. I've done that here, some very simple ones. So a little form with a button where you can enter a name, and then when you click the OK button, the requirement says that the name needs to be stored and the window closed. And based on that, I'm going to generate acceptance criteria. So what happens in the background is that it calls an OpenAI API with a prompt that asks it to generate acceptance criteria for these requirements in a given when then format. I'm going to click this one so it can run in the background. I'm using OpenAI for that, and the specific large language model is GPT 3.5 Turbo. Now generating test cases, here we go. I've asked it to put it in a JSON format that would make it more suitable for uploading in a test tool, either for test automation or a test management tool. Now I don't know if this would actually work or if it's the right format. You could adapt the prompt a bit further to make it really specific for a specific test tool. But in this case you do see that it generates test cases and is quite structured in the way that it returns them with actions and expected results. So I think this could be quite helpful. Not so sure that it would make sense to develop something like this into a fully fledged application, because I think these kind of functions will soon, if not already, be integrated into Atlassian applications and other test management tools. But it's fun to play with nonetheless, and see how the current LLMs cope with these kind of requirements. So that's it for the acceptance criteria generation. And let's have a look at code documentation. So we're going into Visual Studio. Here I have an example of a function that was generated by Copilot Chat based on my requirements. So it generated most of the code. I had to make some adjustments, but it also added these inline comments. So that's quite helpful. Now another thing you can do when you have an undocumented function, like this one for example, generate acceptance criteria, is ask Copilot Chat to explain it. And as you can see here, it generates quite an elaborate explanation of what this code does. I wouldn't actually copy-paste this in a document, I think, nor would I copy-paste it here. But it might be useful if you encounter a function that you haven't seen before, or it's been a while and you forgot what it does and there's some complexity, to use this to have to explain it to you. Now, in this case, it might be helpful to have an inline comment here to sort of introduce the function with a very brief explanation of what it does. So what we can say is summarize it in 2 lines. And then it comes back with something a lot more concise that I can put here. And here I have my introduction to the function. So it's quite straightforward, and I believe it's helpful. Another thing you can do is generate code based on inline comments. So this is something that also works with previous versions of GitHub Copilot, so you don't need the chat one for that. You just start with inline comments. So let's say we want to create a Flask endpoint that returns all users. Okay, so it suggests an app root, so that's good. Let's create the function itself. Let's generate a select from users. Let's say we want first name, last name. it suggests to execute the query, very helpful. It suggests a list. Yes, let's do that. And now iterate through the results. And for each row, append it to the list. So what it actually does here, it creates a list with JSON objects. Well, I'm happy with that. And it suggests to return JSONified version. It uses JSONify to create a JSON structure out of the whole list that we can then return to the front end. Oops, execute. So that's okay. There's one thing it does wrong here. This return should not be part of the for loop. It should come after. Now let's juice it up a little bit. I want to sort them. So sort by first name. Let's see what happens. And here it suggests a sort function. So this is a good way of one, documenting your code and also generating code. It was quite quick. Perhaps a very seasoned developer can do it in the same amount of time without Copilot, but for me this is quite great. So this is what I wanted to show you today, and wish you all a nice weekend.